Qadr. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today's tafsir is going to be on Surah Al-Qadr. So I'll recite this surah as it's short and then I'll begin, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. This chapter is going to be covered today completely in one lesson, inshallah. That's the plan. Now, the surah is called Al-Qadr. That's the title. And the word Qadr has a few different meanings. It can mean estimation, determination, nobility, honor, constriction, dignity, and the most commonly known meaning of Qadr is power. So in relation to the night of Al-Qadr, so we can call it the night of power or the night of nobility or the night of dignities, using these same meanings. And that's because what happens during this night is very special, so that's why it's known by these names. So it's a very special, noble and powerful night, and something important, really important, happens on this night. And today's tafsir, inshallah, is going to explain exactly what that special things that happens on that night. So the night of Al-Qadr, or Laylat Al-Qadr, it's a night in which it's in the one of the last 10 nights in Ramadan. So when we say one of these nights, it means that this night, Laylat Al-Qadr, it starts at the onset of Maghrib and it ends at Fajr, when the sun rises. So this is a really, really holy night. And in fact, it's the holiest night in the entire year. And you'll see why it's so important and holy when I explain this surah, inshallah. And inshallah, you're going to view that night and Ramadan in a very different way, inshallah, I believe, because the more I researched about this night, the more I was excited for this night to come to work even harder, inshallah. So we're going to start, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Verse number 1. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. We sent it down on the night of decree. So Allah is telling us that He actually sent down. What is it? It's the Quran. He sent the Quran on Laylatul Qadr, the night of power. This is what makes this night so important and holy. It's the fact that the Quran came down on that night. So when we say it was sent down, it means that it was sent down completely on that night. However, what we know is that the Quran wasn't revealed entirely in one night, correct? What we know is that the Quran was revealed over the entire 23 years of prophethood. So how does it make sense that Allah is saying in this verse that Allah sent down the Quran, meaning, He didn't say a verse, He said the entire Quran on Laylat al-Qadr. So what we need to understand is that the Quran entirely, before it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ through Angel Jibreel, it was actually written elsewhere. Okay, it was actually written on a preserved tablet, and that preserved tablet is really divine. It's a divine record of all the future events that are going to happen and that happened even before the entire universe was created. So not only the Quran, but all the other books. So everything, the Quran, the Torah, the Injil, all the other books were written in this preserved tablet. And not just that. In fact, everything that's ever happened and everything that's going to happen was written in that preserved tablet. And this shows us how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has knowledge of all things. Okay, and that all things, it's called the decree or the qadr of all things, even before they took place. So this lesson that's taking place right now was written. What you're doing at the moment was written. Everything has been written, and it wasn't written now. It was written even before the entire universe was created. So I'm just going to explain, a little bit about this decree or this qadr, because like I said, this Laylatul Qadr, it's a night which the Quran was revealed. So it's good to have a bit of a good understanding about it. So Qadr, it refers to the concept of Allah knowing everything about everyone and everything. Okay, it's similar to the concept of destiny. Okay, however, the difference is that destiny refers to specific outcomes of individuals, like the specifics of individuals. But Qadr, it refers to Allah's knowledge of everything, not just individuals. Everything governing the universe, everything governing individuals. So there is a little bit of a difference in meaning there. Belief in the Qadr, as you know, it's part of our Iman. We have to believe in Allah's knowledge of all things, and Allah's knowledge of the past, Allah's knowledge of the present, and Allah's knowledge of the future. And in fact, if you've studied the basic principles of Islam and just the basic, things of our belief, one of the 6 pillars of Iman is what? Belief in Qadr. So it's really important that we have a sound belief in the Qadr and the existence of this preserved tablet, called Lawh al-Mahfuz, because that's where the Qadr of all things is actually written down. So we said that the Quran, okay, was inscribed in the preserved tablet. Okay, that's the first thing that happened. So it was written, the entire Quran that we know was written in the preserved tablet. That's the first thing that happened. Okay. After that, it was sent down to the lowest heaven, and that took place on Laylatul Qadr. And then after that, the Quran was gradually revealed to the Prophet ﷺ over 23 years through the angel Jibreel. Okay, so this is the process of the Quran being revealed. So the first of the verses that were revealed in the month of Ramadan. And in that month, it was one of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And that night in particular, like one of the last 10 nights of Ramadan, it's called Laylatul Qadr because of the fact that the decree of all things that is going to happen for the next year is brought down from the preserved tablet to the earth. It takes place on that one particular night of everything that's going to happen for the next year. And then this, happens repeatedly, like every single year. So what we can see is that there's actually like multiple stages that take place in order for the Quran to come into existence, and then for it to be revealed to the Prophet ﷺ through angel Jibreel, and to the Quran that we have between our hands. Now, on that specific night, on Laylatul Qadr, this is when Allah's decree, He decrees the affairs of the world for the upcoming year. So everything that was written to happen for that year comes down, is brought down on that night. And because this is the night that everything is going to happen is coming down, what do we do? What would you do if you knew that on that night, everything that's going to happen on the following year is coming down? And obviously you want good things to be written. What we do is we engage in lots and lots of acts of worship so that on the night that our decree is coming, we're in a state of worship. We want our decree to come when we're worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if on that night we're praying and we're asking Allah to bring goodness to us and ease and happiness, then Allah He will facilitate for the good to take place that year. And of course, needless to say, Allah knew in advance what you were going to be doing on that night. Okay, Allah is aware, and He knew that on that night, whether you're going to be involved in extra acts of worship or when you're going to be getting your beauty sleep, it's all being written beforehand. Allah is aware. So, Allah knows all of this before it even came into existence. Okay, first of all. But unfortunately, some people, when they hear this, they become turned off and they give up in worshiping, extra hard on that night because they say, well, it's already been written. But like, in fact, this knowledge should make you actually strive harder. It shouldn't turn you off because, first of all, it's well known, first of all, that dua is a very powerful act that can affect your destiny, your decree. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing can change the divine decree except dua. Subhanallah. So this hadith makes, really clear as day and night that your dua, it's not only an act of worship in and of itself, obviously, but it can actually change what was going to happen. Subhanallah, it's in our hands. It's not like, there's nothing that we can do about it. No. You decide what you want to happen in the future. It's actually in your hands. Unfortunately, sometimes in this dunya, we can't control affairs. Unfortunately, it's not always in our hands. Sometimes, we can't control the actions of other people. We can't control if we're rich or poor. Sometimes you get a degree, you work really hard, and you're still poor, for example. So sometimes you can't really control things. They're out of your control in this world. But in the akhirah, your akhirah is determined by your actions in the dunya. So if you want that next year to be really good, you should be involved in acts of worship and you should be asking Allah to make things easy for you for that upcoming year. And of course, Allah knew it all, and that's because Allah has knowledge of the unseen. And what we need to remember is that Laylatul Qadr, it's not a one-off night. It's actually a reoccurring night, and it takes place like on that one night. Every single year there's that one night, because every year the record for the next year of that next year is actually going to be brought down, and every year it's a different record. So we don't know exactly when that night is, but what we do know is that it's one of the last 10 nights, and from those 10 nights it's on an odd night of Ramadan. That's the most that we know. I apologize if this explanation was a little bit lengthy, but I feel like it's important that we understand what exactly is Laylatul Qadr, because you hear people say that Laylatul Qadr, it's the night when the Quran was revealed, and it's the night where everything is going to happen comes down, and then this night happens, and then again the following year, what does it happen again? So I wanted everyone to understand that the relationship between the Quran being revealed on that night and your decree being brought down on that night, that they have a relationship together. They actually have a relationship. The next verse, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ, but what will convey to you what the night of Qadr is? Okay, Allah, He asks us, do you know what this night is? Do you know what it is? So subhanallah, oftentimes Allah asks us these questions to just, not sometimes to actually answer them, but it's to just allow us to wonder and ponder, and then after we wonder and we ponder, we think about it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He actually answers it for us. Allah uses this type of speech, this questioning, to bring attention to a really important matter. We kind of know when it is, like I said, but we know that it's on one of the last 10 nights of Ramadan, and on an odd night. But Allah is not asking us that. He's asking us, what is this night? Like, He's not saying when is it. He's like, what is this night? What does that mean? He's like, what happens on this night? He's asking you, do you know what happens on this night? Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alfi shahr. First of all, Allah says, as He is explaining it, because it takes a few verses to explain it, the night of decree, first of all, it's better than 1,000 months. This is the first explanation that Allah is giving us when He's explaining what Laylatul Qadr is, because it needs a couple of verses to explain it. Allah here stresses the importance of this one specific night by comparing it to the worship of 1,000 months. Like, subhanallah, sometimes you don't really understand how important something is until you compare it to something else. Okay, I'll give you an example. If I say, look, this car is really expensive. Okay, look, if I say to you, this car, I point to a car and I say to you, this car is really expensive. Like you think to yourself, okay, it's expensive. Maybe it's, I don't know, $200,000, in your eyes, or maybe it's 100,000. But you think, I wonder, how expensive is it? How? But then I say, look, it's the price of 20 Porsches. Okay. Then you understand the extent of that car being really expensive, because maybe originally thought it was like the price of one Porsche. Okay. In comparison to other brands. But now it's compared to 20 Porsches. Oh, you realize that car is really expensive. It's worth a lot. So you don't want to touch it. You don't want to drive next to it. You want to stay far away from it. Because, if you damage it, you're gone, right? So what Allah is doing here, He's comparing acts of worship on that one night. And He's saying that it weighs more than worshiping Allah than 1,000 nights. Actually, doing acts of ibadah for Allah on this one night is not the same as worshipping Allah for 1,000 months, as many people say. Sorry, I did say nights, it's actually months. Most people think that it's equivalent. But did Allah say here that the night of decree is the same as worshipping Allah as 1,000 months? Have a look at the verse. Does it say the night of decree is the same as worshipping Allah for 1,000 months? No, He did not. No. The word is khair, better. So it's better than worshipping Allah for 1,000 months. Not the same. Better means that it can weigh even more than worshipping Allah for 1,000 months of worship. So let's assume that we worship Allah the entire night on that night. So just imagine that, inshallah, okay, just say, going back to last Ramadan, and we think back to our acts of worship and say, look, we worship Allah all night for the whole last 10 nights, okay? Because this is the ideal. A person that is organized and prepared and prioritizes, they do not wait until every second night, because you don't know exactly which night, which day Ramadan actually officially started. I mean, we could have fasted the wrong day. How do we know? So the whole time that we thought it was an odd night could have been even, right? So ideally is to treat the last 10 nights, each one of them, as the odd night, just to be on the safe side. So just imagine that you actually worshipped Allah every single night on the last 10 nights, okay? And let's imagine that it was equal to worshipping Allah for 1,000 nights. Not better. Let's just imagine it was equal. That means, okay, the reward that you would have received is actually equivalent to worshipping Allah for 83 years and 4 months of worship. Subhanallah, that's a lot. Sometimes it can be hard to do 4 hours of worship, 4 hours. So imagine 83 years and 4 months. And the average life expectancy in Australia is approximately 82 years for a male and 85 years for a female, okay? Somehow, subhanAllah, the women are outliving the men. So really that 1,000 months is equivalent to worshipping Allah for an entire lifetime, and that's if we're comparing it to 1,000, but we know it's actually better. Now, subhanAllah, how kind Allah is, that He gives us these bonus opportunities where He allows us to receive a reward that we would have never been able to earn during normal circumstances. For example, let me look at examples where Allah is so kind and merciful. We look at Laylatul Qadr. We just explained how worshipping Allah on that one night is equivalent to more than 1,000 months of worship. Then there's Hajj. Okay, what's the reward of Hajj? Well, the reward of Hajj, accepted Hajj, it's clearly stated in a hadith as Jannah. It's like guaranteed, because it says in that hadith that all of your sins are removed, similar to the day that you just entered Islam or when your mother first gave birth to you, okay? So when you're born, you're sinless. So when you go to Hajj, it puts you in that same state. And subhanAllah, even though Hajj is only obligatory on us to perform one time in our entire lifetime, this does not mean that we should not go to Hajj more than one time. No. If you have the means financially to go, then go again, and go as often as you can. You are not greedy. If you can afford to go to Hajj more than one time in your lifetime, or if you've gone to Hajj, then I would say put a little savings aside and work towards going again. Because inshallah, if you go again, then all of those sins from that last Hajj to your new Hajj will be removed as well. Another example of where Allah is so super merciful is fasting. Fasting, any voluntary fast removes 70 years of the hellfire from your face. 7 years. Another one is praying in congregation. It earns you 25 or 27 the amount of reward in comparison to when you're praying on your own individually. Another example is performing Umrah in Ramadan is equivalent to the reward as performing Hajj with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the last example I'm going to give you is one that's very, very doable. Okay, it's not as long-term goal as Hajj and Umrah. It's actually really doable, like the fasting. It's the person who prays rak'atain, 2 nights of the night prayer before Fajr, like at any time. And then he prays Fajr, and then he stays worshipping Allah in that same spot until the sun rises. And then when the sun rises, they pray 2 rak'at of Salat al-Duha. And the reward for doing that is equivalent to Umrah. So if you actually calculate how many hours of worship this is, like it sounds like, oh, like Jinan just talked for a whole paragraph. It must be really long. It's actually about a little bit under 2 hours of worship. Like it's under 2 hours of worship, and the reward is Umrah. Umrah is what? How much? $7,000. So this is the reward wise, this is what it gets you. So as you can see, Allah is really eager for us to enter into Jannah. And Allah gives us so many opportunities where we can have all of our sins wiped out, and so many opportunities to be raised in levels in Jannah. And that's due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being so kind and merciful. He really wants us to be on the straight path. He doesn't force us. Allah shows us the path, but He doesn't force us. He lets us make our own decision, but He motivates us through all these opportunities so that we can, like you feel hyped up to do all this good. And He deters us from doing sin through the existence of Jahannam. Because if it wasn't for Jahannam, we would all be sinners. And this chaos this whole world would be total chaos. We'd have an extra 2 billion people making chaos in the world, Subhanallah. The next verse, تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. In it descends the angels and the spirit by the leave of your Lord, of their Lord, with every command. So this verse, it describes something that the role of the angels that they do on that particular night. Okay, on that night, Laylatul Qadr, many angels, they descend from the heavens and they come down to the earth in really large numbers. So many come down to earth that the earth becomes crowded with angels. So these angels bring with them this sense of peace, tranquility, blessing, and it's actually felt by the inhabitants of earth, by us humans. And this peaceful feeling, it stays all the way until the break of Fajr. So the angels will be busy that night recording the unbelievable amount of good deeds that people will be doing on that night, more than any other night of the year, because now we're aware of the deeds that they're multiplied on that night more than any other night. So many Muslims, they spend the entire night in worship. Even the people, early birds that are used to going to sleep at 9:30 p.m., they will have 6 cups of coffee and they will make sure they stay up all night. Like even the people that go to sleep early, because they know the reward, it's just too good to miss out on. So not all of the angels are recording deeds at this point, only certain angels. The rest of the angels, they've got their other roles. Like some of them are actually making dua and praying for the believers, asking Allah to forgive them and have mercy on them. And, this sense of great forgiveness, peace and calmness, like I said, it's felt by those who are sincerely staying up at night and worshiping Allah. It's actually felt. You actually feel closer to Allah, especially if you're doing this whole act of worship at home. I mean, I can imagine it would be a little bit different if you're doing it at the mosque with everyone around you. But if you're at home, and it's all quiet and you are worshipping Allah all alone and crying with khushu' on your own. It's different when you're doing all of this on your own. Notice that Allah not only mentions that the angels descend down to the earth, but He specifically mentions that the Spirit also descends. So this Spirit, what is this Spirit? It's referring to Angel Jibreel. So Allah refers to Jibreel as Ar-Ruh, the Spirit. In various other verses in the Quran, not just in this verse, Allah specifically mentions him with his own title. So he's got his own title, Ar-Ruh, to distinguish him from the other angels. As you know, all the angels have a specific job. Some are in charge of bringing down the rain, others for recording the deeds, while others, their jobs are to, guard people, protect people. Others guard the hellfire. Then there's Angel Jibreel, who has a very, very special, important role, and that is bringing down the revelation to the prophets. Okay, that's his job. So it's not only bringing down the Quran to Muhammad, but to bring down the Torah to Musa, the Injil to Isa, and the rest of the holy, books to the prophets, and they receive them as a revelation. And just remember that not all prophets were messengers. Some were given a unique new law and received a instruction and of an actual book and law, a new law, and others, they did not receive a new law and a new revelation, but they followed the book and the law of the previous prophet that came before them. So Angel Jibreel, he has a really high rank due to this position in conveying the message of Islam to the prophets, and he was like, we could say, the chief of the angels, and he also accompanied the Prophet ﷺ on the night journey known as Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, and he actually took Muhammad ﷺ to the heavens, and the Prophet ﷺ saw glimpses of the unseen during that night. Now in this verse, it's specifically mentioning, it's mentioned that all of the angels descend, they do this descension with Allah's permission, like they don't just do it on their own. This is to remind us that nothing happens ever without Allah's permission. Okay, just keep that in mind. No breath is taken, no leaf falls from a tree, no eye blinks, except with Allah's knowledge and permission. So every movement that takes place, it's all with Allah's command and approval. Even the way you're moving your hands, even the way you're walking, everything that is said and done takes place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. Then Allah says, Salamun hiya hatta matla'il fajr. Peace it is until the rise of dawn. So we're now arriving at like the last verse. However, this last verse is a little bit lengthy in explaining because there's a lot of things to explain, concepts in here. So in this verse, Allah is describing the characteristic of this special night. Allah describes it as salam, peaceful. And as I mentioned earlier, this sense of peace, it's even felt by us. So there seems to be like a physical and a spiritual sense of peace throughout this night. And the reason for this is because of the peace that the angels bring down. Remember, I said that the angels themselves come down and they bring this sense of peace and tranquility. On that night, we actually feel safe and calm, and the influence of the devils is very minimal. And we know that they are locked up anyway in Ramadan. So we're supposed to be making full use of that night, not getting your beauty sleep, okay? This is not the night to say, oh, look, it's a peaceful night, one of the nights in the last 10. Let me get some beauty sleep. No, this is not the night, okay? There's a time and place for everything, and your beauty sleep is not the time to get in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. It's there for worshipping Allah peacefully, without having the influence of the devils to encourage you to do sins. So this night remains peaceful up until the break of dawn at Salat al-Fajr. This is the time for it. So subhanAllah, Allah gives us so many opportunities to seek His forgiveness and in a very high place in Jannah. Yet so many people, they don't take advantage of this night. SubhanAllah. It's so sad. Like they treat it like it's just like any other night of the year. But it's not like any other night of the year. Just like if you worked on the weekend, you would get, for example, not everyone, but you might get double pay. everything has its time and its place, and everything has a different pay. And the pay of hasanat on Laylatul Qadr is not comparable to any other night. Laylatul Qadr, it's got to be treated really, really seriously. So it begins from Maghrib, and this means from the time that you break your fast when you hear the adhan all the way up until the break of Fajr. Not when the sun like completely rises, but until the break of Fajr. So for this reason, I strongly discourage doing any social events and iftars that will drag out into the night, particularly in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. You know, for those people who have regular family gatherings in Ramadan, this is great. This is actually really great. And everyone knows me, like I'm really for this, because I believe that it's good. It brings the family together and it strengthens the ties of kinship. And this is really good for the kids and for the family, like getting together with your family, like in Ramadan or outside Ramadan. I truly believe it's really important for a family. However, in saying that, I do feel that the shaitan tricks people into doing a good deed. And then he leads them to waste the nights of Ramadan by socializing, laughing, chilling, and hanging out. Okay, so your intention may be good. Your intention was, yeah, let's bring all the family together. This is awesome. But the shaitan, he has a really clever way of turning social events into sinful events at times, especially when the event drags out. Okay, the sunnah is to feed the fasting. Yes. The sunnah is to keep ties of kinship. Correct. But the sunnah of visits is to make them short and sweet. And I think anyone that knows me well enough knows I'm very for that. I want you to think about the hectic life that the Prophet ﷺ had. Like, just imagine, some people live a roller coaster life. I want you to imagine that you are the Prophet, okay? Now, you're a man, you're a Prophet, you have several wives. That means you've got to give time for every single one of those wives. Got several friends, and all of them love you, and all of them want to spend time with you. You've also got so many responsibilities. You're a leader of a whole, tribe of a city. Yet he managed, can you imagine? The Prophet ﷺ managed to visit and check up on all of his wives every day. And he managed to catch up with his best friend Abu Bakr every single day. How did he do that? Like, how did he manage to do that? SubhanAllah. Some of us will find it really hard to catch up with friends, but he managed to check up on his friend every single day in person. And we can check up on our friend with just a phone call away, and we don't. But there's a reason why we don't. And the reason, because those phone calls can drag out. And this is actually the reason why people do not call and check up on their family and their friends every single day. The reason is because people take too long on the phone and too long in their visits, and this is not the sunnah. Okay? So, subhanallah, how did he do all of this? How did he manage to see his family, his friends? How did he manage to have meetings with the leaders? How did he manage to give lessons? How did he manage to answer all the questions that people came up to him and asked? Women would come up to the Prophet ﷺ and complain about their husbands. Okay. And as you know, when someone comes and complains about their husband, that can take 4 hours. When someone comes and complains and says, look, I need a resolution, you're giving someone marriage counseling, sometimes it can take hours. So how did he manage to do that? To give these women advice, and he also spent time in the mosque, and he prayed for hours at home. How was he able to do all those things and see his family and his friends every day? Well, this is the answer. The answer is, are you ready? Time management. This is actually the answer. The answer lies in the amount of time that he spent in every single thing. His visits were short. That means when he would go and pop by to see Abu Bakr, he wouldn't stay an hour or two. He would go in, give salam, catch up with him, explain a new verse or something like that, 10, 15 minutes, and leave. That was it. It didn't drag out and hours into the night, and he didn't spend all day doing one thing. Sometimes we want to do one thing like an act of worship, and then we spend all day doing it. But what about the rest of our responsibilities, you know? So the problem is that sometimes we spend all day with people catching up, but really doing these things all day, it's only possible for people who have nothing to do. Okay, this is the fact of the matter. Productive people who are busy, who have work, who are working for their akhirah or working like for their livelihood, who have a job, who have a family to raise, who have young children, who have parents that are trying to take care of, who have a house to clean and food to cook and picking up and dropping off. It's not possible to spend all day with one person. Even if you're spending time with your mother, this is like such a noble act of worship, spending time with your mom. But if you're going to do that all day, when are you going to have time for your household? When are you going to cook? When are you going to clean? The husband's going to be in a bad mood. And it all adds up. So we have to learn how to, spend a little bit of time doing each thing. So yes, the Prophet ﷺ loved his family, and he loved doing acts of worship. He loved going to the mosque. And what he did was he just divided his time. Okay, that's all it is. It's just about dividing your time. And the problem is, you see, like as an ummah, we need to realize that in order for us to be good Muslims, okay, and to be good worshippers of Allah, and to be good wives and good daughters and good mothers, and be good at everything, to be the ideal Muslimah, we need to learn to manage our time wisely. We can't obviously divorce ourselves from our families and our communities and, worship Allah in isolation. We can't say that in order to be a worshipper of Allah, we're going to not socialize with people, because that's not the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ did socialize with people. He had a good relationship with people. People loved being around him. He was very approachable, and that was because of his friendly nature. He had a cheerful face, but he was also careful about how much time he spent doing each activity. So at times, okay, imagine this, the companions, they would spend a little bit too much time with the Prophet, and that was beginning to impact on the Prophet ﷺ's personal life. Okay, obviously, you know what that means. The wife is at home, the husband is spending a little bit too much with his friends who are companions. Like, these are really respectable people, but okay, what about her? Sometimes the companions that would arrive to the Prophet's house a bit earlier than expected, and they would stay after they finished their meal. And like, you invited someone at a certain time, they came a bit early, and then they stayed a bit too late, and that was actually beginning to annoy the Prophet. Why did it annoy him? Because he knew he had a family that he needed to spend time with. He had wives, he had children, and he needed to give them some attention. But he was too embarrassed to tell the companions that, obviously he loved them so much. It's so hard to tell people that you love, okay, please don't stay too long and please don't come early. It's actually really hard because you love being around them. It's not like you hated them, okay? Like, why'd you invite them over if you hate them? So obviously, if someone invites you over, it's because they love you and they love your company. So it's not that he didn't want to spend time with them. It was just too much time, and then he needed to give time to his wives. So he was a bit too embarrassed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself revealed the Prophet's inner feelings through the revelation of this following verse. I'll put it up right here. Where Allah says, believers, so this verse is directed to the believers, okay? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, so to the believers. Do not enter the Prophet's apartment or house for a meal unless you've been given permission to do so. And do not linger until a meal is ready. When you are invited, go in. Then when you have taken your meal, leave. Do not stay on and talk, for that would offend the Prophet, though he would shrink from asking you to leave, meaning he would be embarrassed to ask you to leave. God does not shrink from the truth, like Allah is not embarrassed from the truth. When you ask his wife for something, then do so from behind a screen, and the verse goes on. So that verse, subhanAllah, it mentions some very important points. Now, isn't it important how the Quran, it actually covers every single aspect of our lives. So this verse looks at social etiquette for visiting people in their homes, and it highlights the importance of respecting your host's, your host's privacy and your host's time. This verse, it advises the companions, don't arrive so early, like earlier than expected, and don't stay so long after you're eating that meal that you've been invited to. And this is advice, obviously, not just for the companions and the Prophet, but it's actually extension to all of the believers. When we see a verse like this, just so we can all be aware, these verses are not directed only to the Prophet and his companions. It's in extension directed as a lesson to all the believers. We are supposed to read these verses and take a lesson from them. We're supposed to take a lesson when you are invited to a meal at a specific time. Alhamdulillah, we all have watches now. In the time of the Prophet, it would have been like, come right after Dhuhr, for example, and then someone comes a little bit before Dhuhr. That's not really good. So, someone invites you at a specific time. We're not meant to come early unless we've gotten the AOK from the host, okay? The host, at that time, they're busy preparing food. They're busy cleaning the house and doing all those, obviously, the last minute things that they don't necessarily want to do when everyone's around. I'm sure you've all been a host before and you've invited someone over for dinner or dessert or whatever it is. And when someone comes like half an hour early, you're like in the middle of doing something, maybe you're vacuuming or mopping or doing something important, and like maybe your clothes are all messed up and your hair's not brushed or whatever it is. And you don't necessarily want to really do that in front of everyone, and the second advice from Allah himself is that one shouldn't stay beyond the expected time. Okay, so beyond, like I would say, in part of our culture, usually in our culture, so this goes from country to country, everyone's culture is a little bit different, but in our culture, usually the guest stays for dinner, then the guest stays like an extra hour or so for dessert, and then that's it. The night is over. That's pretty much it. So it goes back to culture. Some cultures are, it's a really short time, and some cultures, they have like a little bit of a, it's the norm, for example, that a stay is maybe 3-4 hours, and that's normal. But it goes back to the culture of a people. So we're not supposed to stay above what is the norm, or if the guest says, we're going to finish at a certain time, then really we're supposed to, like respect the host. It's not saying like, oh my God, they said it needs to end at 4. If we leave at 4:01, we're in big trouble from Allah. No, this is not how, it's just, we're supposed to try our best to not annoy the host. Obviously, the host is not going to get annoyed if you stay 5 minutes over, but just, we've got to take these things into consideration, because we don't want to do things where that host will wish that they never invited us in the first place, So this is supposed to mean is that we're supposed to be polite to our host, to our host, by not overburdening them with a really long visit, and by using our time wisely as well. We're meant to understand that us as hosts, so imagine that you are a host, that we as hosts shouldn't spend so much time entertaining our guest to the point that we're not giving our own family their time too. Our family also has a right and it deserves our attention and love. So sometimes you're giving so much attention to your guests. Okay, what about your family? When you have guests over, you might not be able to obviously give your husband and the kids the usual attention that you give them, obviously. And sometimes your family, they yearn that attention. And it's really hard to give them that attention when the house is just a bit upside down, and there's all these people around. And so for that reason, I really advise, by setting a good example, by making your short to people's houses short, and your visit short and sweet, and inshallah your guests will also follow the example. If someone does not understand that example, then maybe a more direct way is better. I thought that this would be a good opportunity to briefly talk about this time management issue, because it does relate to the way that we organize our time in Ramadan. So please don't neglect your extended family. Okay, I'm not saying don't invite them over. You should be inviting them over. Don't neglect them with the excuse of, no, we need to spend Ramadan in worship. You know, that's not what I'm trying to say. You know, keep the ties of kinship, invite your family over. I'm all for it, but balance is the key. Yeah. So I know that there are many wives that complain about being forced to have iftar with their in-laws every single day or every other day of Ramadan. I've had women that complain about this. And unfortunately, this turns Ramadan, which is meant to be a time for spiritual growth, you know, it turns this month of ibadah into a month of socializing, weight gaining, cooking all day, and lots of cleaning. So the whole night is spent doing all these things. So the problem is that people, they don't understand the concept of balance. So make an effort to catch up with your family over iftar, you know, maybe once a week. That sounds very reasonable. But then end that gathering at the time of Taraweeh, even if you are going to pray at home. Like, it's very unfortunate. Maybe it's just the culture of the Arabs. Unfortunately, there are many bad cultural habits where the men, they go to pray the mosque Taraweeh, and the women stay home, right? Not praying. No, not praying, but overdosing on dessert and karbouj and fruit, and then ta'zila and cleaning and socializing. Like, no, women should either go and pray at the mosque with their husband, or even better, stay home and pray your Taraweeh in peace and quiet, away from distractions. This is the best place for a woman to pray, in her home, in the most secluded place in her house. And in the last 10 nights, I encourage the men to dedicate their days and their nights doing what? I'tikaf. This is the sunnah. And the women, they should be spending their last 10 nights. Either they are permitted to go to i'tikaf, with the permission of their husbands. They can do that if that mosque caters for it. And I also encourage women to stay home as much as possible in these last 10 nights, and exhaust yourself in worship from the time of the adhan of Maghrib until Fajr, okay? And organize your family iftars, all of them, and your invitations that take place in the first 20 days of Ramadan. Then what you do is you politely, in advance, excuse yourself in the last 10 nights, and you let people know of this so that you make good use of every single second after Maghrib. So I would recommend talk to your family about this beforehand so that they don't feel shocked and angry with you doing what you're doing, and they're taking things the wrong way. Some people, they take things very, very wrong. So I know I did veer off a little bit about this topic and I talked about Ramadan, but it does go back to time management, and this is an essential aspect of this verse. An entire verse here has been dedicated to highlight how important time management is in planning your acts of worship so that you can make use of these business reward times. And as Ramadan is only about 6 months' time, roughly, we should really start thinking about how we're going to plan our Ramadan in Laylatul Qadr from now, not 2 days before Ramadan. This chapter should really have hyped you up to start planning from now. Plan to physically be prepared for Ramadan by doing extra days of fast. This is how you can physically get ready. That way your body doesn't go into like shock mode, and strive in learning how to read the Quran as well from now. You can do a lot in 6 months. You can do a lot. If you haven't done so already, your journey in learning how to read the Quran, please start now. There is 6 months. You can get your foot in. As Ramadan is the month of Quran, we're supposed to be striving to read the Quran in Ramadan a lot more than any other time. So speak to your family about what you're planning to do for your iftars, and this will allow you, inshallah, to have a very productive Ramadan next year, inshallah. So in summary, Surah Al-Qadr, it speaks about the significance of Laylatul Qadr, and then spending that specific night every year, like that one night, in acts of worship, more than any other night of the year, because of the immense reward and forgiveness that Allah gives on that night. So subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.